Mental Health Monday
on Radio City Talk
with Mick Coyle.
Tackling the stigma.
Radio City Talk.
Yeah, welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monday. It's episode 99. We're nearly into triple figures. When we started doing the show, we thought, well, we'll see if we can get through 6 to 8 episodes and see if anyone fancies coming on and still talking about it. Turns out they did. Episode 99 is here. We've got a really brilliant guest on the show as well, who's going to be sharing her story, both in terms of where she's been, where she's come from, and where she's hoping to go to, and also how she might be able to help you out as well, because she's got a newer academy which she's helping set up, which looks down the artistic route. Welcome to the studio, I'm very pleased to say, Anthea Thomas. Anthea, great to see you. Thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Episode 99.
I know. Just missed a cut for episode 100.
We are planning something quite big for episode 100, but we're just waiting on the confirmation and the clarification that everything is set up.
Oh my gosh, intriguing.
Yeah, and I know you work in sort of events management now, and You'll know what that's like when you've got everything ready to go.
Yeah,
and just
now biting time.
You're just waiting. You can't send out the press release because something's not been ticked. We've dotted the I's, but we've not crossed the T's. Yeah. That's where we're up to at the moment. Anthea, it's great to see you. Now, first and foremost, people will notice your accent.
Yes.
And they'll go, hang on a minute, is it normally people from the Northwest that you speak to? You're now based in the Northwest. You're originally from London.
I am originally from London. However, I've lived in the Northwest for nearly 20 years. It'll be 20 years in December, actually. So I'm from North London, from Enfield, very proud to be a Londoner. And I moved up to the Northwest. It was part of my story, really. One of the major reasons I moved up to the Northwest was to do with my mental health and an issue that happened whilst I was living in London.
It's brilliant to have you on the show. And I think people will get a real sense of, when they hear your story, a sense of what it's like to be working, what it's like to have busy lives, what it's like trying to fit in your busy lives with family life, raising children as well, when children come into the mix as well, and trying to keep on top of that. And a sense that, you know, the rat race for a lot of people is very real. And I guess for you, that was very much the case, that work was something that you kind of fell into and it became something of a treadmill that was difficult to get off.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly growing up and starting my working career in London, there's a set expectation of city life and how much you're going to earn and the type of house you're going to live in. And so that pressure was always there, really, from a very young age. And I grew up in a single parent household as well. So it was just my mother, my brothers and I. And so as a little girl looking out and seeing the successful people in the world, they typically came from your 2.4 families, mother, father, you know, an idyllic domestic dwelling, you know, going off to college and then university. And so it always seemed to me that I was at a disadvantage straight away. But within me, even as a young child, I knew that I wanted to do more than what was my present situation. I knew I always wanted to achieve more. That's not to say that my mother did anything wrong. She's a fantastic mother. She's actually my hero. But I just knew I wanted to do more. But when you're living in a city environment, and I'm sure people in Liverpool would feel the same, there's a certain expectation, almost like the elite and then the rest of us. And that's certainly what it felt like when I was growing up.
What were those sort of barriers that you could see? What were those things you're thinking, right, I'm going to have to overcome a number of things here because of my background?
Well, first of all, obviously coming from an Afro-Caribbean background, that as much as I never had any sort of racial discrimination that I can remember, I do remember being very aware from a very young age that the vast majority of people in my classroom were white and a lot of their families were together. And so I grew up with a stigma that, well, you know, a lot of Afro-Caribbean families, they end up splitting up, the dad isn't always on the scene. And that, for me, I struggled with a little bit because I wanted to have that 2.4 family, that, you know, that idyllic situation. And it's really only recently, since becoming a parent myself, that I've realised that actually I had a pretty good, solid upbringing and childhood. But that was one barrier that I had to overcome mentally. And then also the stigma of, you know, your financial situation. Again, coming from a single parent family, I was under the impression that there was only certain people that would ever have money. I grew up in a household where terms were said like money's tight, we can't afford this, haven't got anything. And so when you're growing up with those sort of negative connotations attached to money, that's something you take on as an adult as well. And so you become afraid of money. And it actually, for me personally, it made me irresponsible with some of the spending I was doing, because I didn't feel I was worthy of having the money that I was getting. So I'd spend it really quickly, which then sometimes spirals it out of control. And it did with myself. I got myself into a hell of a lot of debt as I was growing up as well. So that was barrier number 2. And then obviously your social scene as well, like where you grow up. So obviously I was born in Enfield, but when the family broke down, we moved to Tottenham in North London again. And great set of friends and family. And I actually really enjoyed growing up in Tottenham. But again, stigma would have it that, it's not really the right side of town, and people from that area won't really progress to anything. So there were the 3 things that I had to overcome myself. And then 4th and finally, being the youngest in a family of 7 other siblings, none of which had really stepped out of the sort of stereotypical, wanting to go to uni and things like that. None of my siblings had done. And so I knew I wanted to, but I also didn't want to stick my head over the parapet of being that child in the family. So there were 3 that were really obvious, and then there was one that was more personal to me as a struggle I had to come over.
Was there a sense then from an early age that hard work, working hard and working a lot would be something which might help you overcome some of those issues, to get you somewhere where no one in your family had gone before, to break through some of those barriers that people saw, that if people thought you were a hard worker, you put in the hours, you'd put in the shift, that actually they would be the factors that would make a difference? Yeah,
absolutely. And also just sheer stubborn determination. As much as I wanted to do better, I also wanted to be able to be in a situation where I could help other people and help people get out of the situations that I'd come across over the years. And so that really fired me up. I just had it in my head that I had to keep going. No matter what, I just had to keep going. And also thinking about my mother again, throughout all of our childhood, she was resilient. Yeah, she had her ups and downs. Yeah, she had her battles with mental health, but she kept going and she kept going. And that, without her really talking to us about it, that really inspired me, because I just thought to myself, well, if she can handle this, and she's got 7 children to think about, I can handle it. I can keep going. So in terms of that message, like you say, you look back now and you think that was a strong message that you got from family, which was work hard. That's a good message to get. If you work hard, you want something, you can go out and you can achieve it. At what point in your life, what age was it where you started to think, oh, actually, maybe I'm not quite doing this right, or maybe going down this route is starting to have a negative impact on me? I'd say probably from 16 onwards, because I'm intelligent and I can learn things, but I'm not what you would call classically academic. And so there were areas I would struggle. Now, saying that, I did get through my GCSEs and I'm very proud of my results, but I had to work incredibly hard. And again, I was always comparing myself to my peers. And so there were friends of mine who were not working as hard and acing their exams, just literally flying through, and I was the one that was pulling all-nighters and driving myself insane trying to scrape through. And so from sort of 16 upwards, I knew that I was different. I knew I had to do things very, very differently to other people. And then when I left school and I went to college, I actually studied fashion design and promotion, because I was determined I was going to be a fashion designer. And that's when there was certain instances during my college time where I just thought, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. Who do I think I am? And I've that sort of who do I think I am syndrome really embedded itself into my head from about 18. I was coming up to my second year of my BTEC, and I was trying really hard. I was doing a bit of modelling as well, and I was doing modelling at the Hippodrome and things like that in the Business Design Centre in London. And I remember thinking to myself, who do I think I am? Nobody in my family does this. What makes me so special? And I'd say that was probably the most pivotal point in the turn of my mental health. There were things from my childhood I hadn't dealt with, and obviously they were now starting to come to the fore because I was an adult, I was living independently, I was doing all these things, I was going to college, I was mixing with people, and again, a lot of the friends that I had at the time were further up the sort of elitist chain than I was, and I was trying to emulate their lives. And that's when my mental health started to deteriorate, really, from that sort of point onwards.
I mean, who do I think I am is such a good question, because I think as you get older, you become almost a little bit more comfortable about who you are, where you're from, and what you're about. But when you're a young adult, you're finding your way in the world. If you do get obsessed with asking yourself that question, it becomes very internalized, doesn't it? Because you've almost not had a chance to decide who you are.
Yeah.
You're just feeling your way and you're taking the opportunities when you come. And I always think that's one of the things where people haven't got to grips with yet, and we haven't as a society, that move from sort of puberty, adolescence into adulthood. I think there's still a sense that grown-ups kind of know what they're doing. And when you become a grown-up, you'll know.
Yeah.
And I think so many people are in that age group between 18 and I think probably take it right up to 30 now, where you're thinking, well, am I doing this right? Is this? I'm just kind of rolling with it. And then when you get to look back, you think, well, that was just all experience. But for you there, who was having those opportunities, modelling and all that kind of thing as well, for a lot of people, they might have been looking at you thinking, wow, hasn't Anthea got everything going for her? But all in your mind, you're thinking, who
the heck do I think I am? And also, as well, it sort of stems back to when you're younger, because you're constantly asked, probably from about 4 or 5 years of age, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And we still do it now as a society. I have stopped myself from asking my daughter that, because every day she changes her mind, for one thing, but also because we don't really know, and there isn't ever one set path for
Mine's
you
on
to
to
take.
ice skater at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, my daughter wants to be 3 different things. She wants to be a dancer, a gymnast and an artist. But she's only willing to work 3 days a week, so fair play to her.
3 jobs, 1 day per week.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I interrupted there.
No, it's absolutely fine. So, yeah, you're constantly asked that question, what do you want to do? And even when you leave school and you go into college, or you go to uni, you're constantly asked, what is it you want to do? Where is this going to take you? And whether that comes from your parents, from your friends, from professionals, from educators, that message is always there. And for me particularly, I really didn't have the answer. So I'd left school with a decent set of GCSEs because I'd worked really hard for it. I'd gone to college. I'd spent 2.5 years studying fashion design and promotion. I got offered 2 places for university. And I was thinking, oh gosh, what am I doing? I can't do this. And so I didn't accept any of the offers for university and just started working, because I just thought, that's not what we do. That's not what Anthea Thomas should be doing. Who does she think she is going to uni? That's not for her. She's used to seeing people go out to work and earning an honest crust, that sort of way. And so it really changed how I started to think of myself, and I really started to dumb down my abilities. I started thinking, well, actually, I can't do those kind of things. And at that point, I was probably at one of my lowest levels without really realising it. So I was at a very vulnerable stage. I was 18 and I had met this young man who I thought was going to be the love of my life. And he was very successful. He was like the polar opposite to me, even though mentally we were probably the same. But he had a very, very clear vision of what he was going to do. He was in university. He was going to become a doctor. He was doing this. He was doing that. He was very, very driven. He came from a very wealthy family, from a very wealthy background. And so I sort of took a step back and allowed him to take centre stage. And unwittingly, without even realising it, it just chipped away at my self-confidence every single day. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't completely nasty to begin with. It was a very loving and very, what people would say, a true love story. But again, I was only young. And because he knew that academically he was higher up the food chain, so to speak, than myself, there were times when the relationship started to go bad that would be the button he would always press. Well, I'm going to go off and do this because you can't do that. And so it's slowly but surely chipping away. And what I discovered with that relationship was, because I was fighting my own internal battles, as in, who do I think I am? What am I doing with my life? Where am I going? I just assumed this role of just being his partner. And so I started to shut myself away from friends, from family. And then when that relationship became incredibly violent, that's when I realised I haven't really got anyone to turn to. I didn't tell anybody what was going on. In fact, there was a particular incident that happened where my neighbours had actually phoned the police. I never wanted to ever phone the police because I didn't have an awful lot of faith in that they would help me. And one of my neighbours actually phoned the police, and they came round, and it was an eye-opening situation. However, I still went back. And this is something that I wanted to get across, particularly to anyone who's in a domestic violence situation. It's never that easy to just walk away. When you're an outsider looking in, if the outsider looking in on that particular night, they would have said, why didn't you just go? But the hold that somebody has over you mentally, when you're that low that you don't even realise who you are as a person and what you're meant to do, you don't even have the strength to reach out to friends and family. And so it's very difficult to then walk away, because that person almost becomes you, becomes your whole life, becomes your rock. And so as much as it was a very toxic relationship, it was the only one that I knew and where I felt that I sort of belonged, because that's what I was good for.
You mentioned right at the start of the programme, you had the big move north 20 or so years ago.
Yes.
You talk about the relationship that you were in. Was that part of the change in circumstance for you, the geographical location to get away from the south of England?
Yeah, absolutely. So that relationship ended, thankfully, with me being in one piece. However, the torment didn't end just because I moved out of that relationship, and it got to a point where it was affecting my family, it was affecting my work. And so I reached out to a friend who lived in the Northwest, and I just said, look, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, why don't you just come up and see what it's like? Come up for a few days. Well, a few days turned into 18 months. When I first moved to Northwest, I moved to Liverpool. I lived in Highton. I then moved to Crosby, which was very nice as well. And one of the reasons I moved back to London, actually, and one of the main reasons, because the role I had, the marketing job I had in London, they'd never replaced me. And so they offered the position back to me. And I said, well, OK, I'll go back to London. Things seem to have died down. But as soon as I went back to London, as much as I miss my friends and my family, I knew the Northwest was where I was meant to be. So I saved up every penny I earned, cleared my debts, and bought a house back up in the Northwest in Wigan. And some really, really good times up there. But what I hadn't realised was that I hadn't processed any of the issues that had happened throughout my life to that point. And I actually had a breakdown. I was 23 at the time. I was working full time. I was actually in work the day that I had my breakdown. I was actually about to present to a room full of about 100 sales executive on a new piece of packaging that I had been the leader on the redesign and the rebranding. And I was in the photocopy room just preparing some documents. And I just remember feeling really lightheaded. And then next thing I know, I'm crying hysterically in my manager's office. They had to drive me home, and I had to get the crisis team out because I was just an emotional wreck. And from that day, I didn't leave my house for 6 months. I had the crisis team out every single day to make sure I hadn't done anything silly and that I was up and dressed and fed and those kind of things. A doctor, rather than going to a GP practice, he would come to me, he would watch me, take my medication. And that was a complete shell shock because I couldn't understand what had happened. And it was only when I started going to therapy. I started with cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT as it's commonly known. And they obviously have to get you to talk about certain things. And there were so many different points in my childhood and in my early teens, my mid-teens, my late teens, and obviously in the transition from moving from London to the Northwest, that I had just buried and just ploughed on through because I had that whole mentality of, you just got to get on with it. You've just got to get on with it. And I didn't deal with a lot of stuff. And so it really affected my mental health. And from that process, it really made me see the world very, very differently. And I knew from that point that I couldn't continue on the way that I was. However, I wasn't savvy enough to realise how to make money, because I knew obviously I hadn't worked for 6 months. I hadn't done anything for 6 months. I had a mortgage and everything to pay. And so I went back into a job, and life continued on. I still had some therapy. And then you get to a certain point with certain therapies, you think, oh, I'm all right now. So you stop going and you stop doing the practices. And I met the father of my daughter, and again thought he was the love of my life, and we were going to live happily ever after. And that was the picture. We had everything, really. We had good jobs, money in the bank, a really nice house, a beautiful daughter, and we were about to get married. And I thought, oh my God, I've done it. I've nailed it. And then 5 days before we were meant to get married, now, bearing in mind, we were living in Southport at this point. All of my friends and family, well, the vast majority of my friends and family, all of my family, are still in London. They'd bought train tickets and hotels and all sorts of stuff. 5 days before the wedding, I found out through a text message that he had been having an affair. And then that was that. I lost everything. I lost my fiancé. I lost my home. I lost my dignity, my self-respect, my confidence went through the floor. And there I was, a single mother with a 4-year-old, not knowing what to do. And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I've ended up like my mother, like the situation I didn't want to be in. And that sounds really cold, and it sounds like, oh, I really had no respect for my mother. That wasn't it at all. I just wanted to do better and to be different. And here I was, and almost like history was repeating itself. My dad left when I was 5. My daughter's dad's left when she's 4. I was just like, this is just how life is going to be. And I was incredibly low. I looked at putting my daughter up into care. I made phone calls for that to happen. I wrote goodbye letters to people, and I contemplated very, very seriously just ending it all, because I just didn't think I could carry on, and I certainly didn't think I'd be a good enough mother for my daughter. And what saved me was my sister, who lives in America, actually. She happened to FaceTime me that particular night, where I was sat on my own on the floor of my kitchen, just hysterically crying. And she stayed with me on FaceTime. She helped me literally get up. She helped me check and make sure my daughter was okay. And she stayed on FaceTime with me until literally put me to bed. Now, bearing in mind, she lives in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm in Southport, England. And she stayed on FaceTime until I fell asleep, just to make sure that I was okay. And the next day, I remember thinking how awful that must have been for her, particularly because she was thousands of miles away. She couldn't just jump in the car. She couldn't get to me quickly. She couldn't even reach out to anybody locally to me to come and help. And I thought to myself, I've got to do something. I've got to do something to never be in that situation again. And so I reached back out. I went back to my doctors and I just said, look, I'm at a really low point, and it's got to a point where I could do something very, very silly if I don't get some help. So again, got signposted to talking therapy this time, because what they discovered was that sometimes you need to exercise those demons. Sometimes you need to talk about them rather than bury them. And so this is why I'm here as well today, because I'm not ashamed to say that these things happened. I try to stop believing it, try to stop almost that reality, but that is my reality. And the only way I've got to this stage is by confronting it and talking about it and being open and honest about it. And it's very difficult. And I think back to that night often, because my daughter's my whole world. I do everything for her. And the fact that I had made calls with social services asking what the process would be to put her into care is very, very painful. But that process needed to happen for me to come through to the other side. And I vowed as well that I would do whatever I could to help other people, to let them know that sometimes it's okay not to be okay, and that you've got to just find somebody that you can confide in, whether that's a stranger or on the other line of like Samaritans or whatever the organisation, a friend or a family member. But you have to talk to somebody. You have to let somebody in.
Thank you for being so sort of honest in sharing that story.
That's okay.
I kind of got a sense that as you were sort of telling it, that it's a story that you've begun to share as well. I know with the team at Hope Street that you've spoken about it. Have you had that conversation with your sister? about
Yes.
what happened that night?
Yeah, actually, she got married in 2017 and I was her matron of honour, which is hilarious because obviously doing event management as a job is one thing, but trying to do it transatlantic was a challenge, but I rose to it. And so my daughter and I, we went over to the States for the wedding and we spoke about that evening and we cried and, you know, we reassured each other that it was going to be okay. And then she asked me to do a speech actually on her wedding day. She didn't tell me until speech time on her wedding day, and she just wanted me to just obviously say a few words about her. And I just wanted to let everybody know what an amazing woman she was, or she is, I should say, she's still with us. And just told them that when I was at my lowest point most recently, she was the one that was literally on the end of a phone line for me and brought me through. So, you know, I wanted to give her recognition for that. But yeah, we've talked about it and, you know, we don't dwell on it, but we still have conversations as in it's not going to get that stage kind of thing.
I tell you, weddings are emotional enough.
I know. It's a tearjerker.
Absolutely. You know, Anthea, because the time we've got with you, we don't have a great deal of time now to talk about the work you're doing now. I can point people in the direction of the Big Condo Academy now. You talked about your sort of the fashion work that you wanted to do. Something you've been able to get back into now, but also look at the whole of the arts world.
Yes.
Work that you do with, they call them NEETs.
Yeah.
People are not in education, employment or training as well. And if people Google Big Condo Academy, you can find out more about the work. But can you just summarise it
Super
for
quick,
us?
yeah. So basically, we've set up the Big Condo Academy for anyone aged 16 or over who has a passion for either music, fashion, film, or modelling. We are offering free courses. It's a level 2 certificate in creative studies, and it's free if you're not in education, employment, or training, or on certain benefits. And it's an opportunity to learn the employability side of those careers. So honing your natural skills, giving you that boost of confidence. And we also will be running, with the support of Hope Street as well, emotional intelligence as well. So make sure that they're mentally prepared for going to work in these highly competitive environments as well. And that's what we want to do. Both myself and my business partner, we just want to give back and be able to help those young people that are probably sat at home like myself. I was not very academic and thinking, oh, what am I going to do? And just give them that encouragement to go forward, really. That's
the Big Condo Academy, and we'll get the links up on our social media as well, so people can find out. And there's loads of information. Just type it into Google, and it's the first thing that comes up, the Big Condo Academy. And Anthea, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for joining us on the programme, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again very soon.
Hopefully.
With Radio City Talk Mental Health Monday. Episode 100 is with us next week.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
On Radio City Talk.